Another day, another presidential pause. The world's two biggest superpowers pulling back from all-out economic war, at least for now. President Trump dialing back his trade war with China, giving more time to negotiators, which is, of course, adding to the uncertainty. The temporary pause in the tariff back and forth, more than enough for Wall Street. Stocks closed just moments ago. All three indices saw massive gains. Comparing it to Liberation Day and where it stood. You can see a little bit of that right there. This is what it looked like. And of course, that's the day that President Trump announced tariffs on both our friends and our foes. So, of course, everybody just wants to know what happens next and whether this pause can become permanent and yield a real agreement.
Now that we have brought these very high tariffs down to 10%, I think the markets, business people live in the future, so I think we can go through, at that 10% baseline, which is very easy to calibrate with.
Okay, so we know Wall Street basically giddy over the pause, but there's this lingering question: what happens if there isn't a bigger, longer-term deal in the next 3 months? President Trump signaling that no deal would mean redoing the tariffs of sorts against China?
They would go up substantially higher. Okay. And then at 145, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy. But they can go, they got very high because of additional tariffs I applied during the course because of fentanyl and other things. But no, but they'd go substantially higher.
So as we're coming on the air this afternoon, we have new insight here at CNN into how we got to this announcement from this morning. A senior administration official tells us that the president had recently become sensitive to many of the things we've been talking about at this hour for the last few weeks. Things like the potential for photos of empty store shelves, and of course, the constant bad news from Wall Street. White House officials, though, do privately and publicly insist that leveling historically high tariffs on China wasn't a misstep, but acknowledge that the president's trip to the Middle East today was a factor in speeding up some kind of announcement. So the question, has this all been worth it? Will it be worth it? Here's what The Atlantic wrote today, quote, when President Donald Trump launched his trade war on the world, he issued a stern warning, quote, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. China ignored the warning. It was rewarded anyway. This morning, Trump largely suspended his trade war in return for nothing but promises of ongoing discussions. And this is a tweet from the longtime director of financial planning at Morningstar, who wrote this, quote, this has been the stupidest market cycle I have ever lived through. And she concluded it with a facepalm emoji. All right, our panel's here, along with CNN chief domestic correspondent and anchor Phil Mattingly. Phil, would you describe this situation as a facepalm emoji?
Yeah, I mean, the social media post kind of laying bare the stupidity of my workflow for the better part of the last couple of months, which cuts a little deep here, but I think underscores a point here that is important for everybody to keep in context. One, is this the framing and the exact structure that the Trump administration laid out for their intent when they first launched kind of the equivalent of a nuclear warhead in tariff terms over the course of the last couple of months? I don't think that would be the case. And anybody who tells you that this was a very clear, absolutely sticking to the plan that was laid out in the initial sense of things is not really telling the truth. There can be another piece of this too, and not to sound like an economist who's always on the one hand, on the other hand, it's important to note that the structure in which these negotiations are going to be taking place between Chinese officials and U.S. officials likely wouldn't have been taking place in this way with these particular point people running the negotiations on each side were it not for the most maximalist approach that President Trump took. Where does it actually take things in the end? Look, as you laid it out quite well, it is a very, very open question in terms of how this all ends. Here's something that's interesting, though, to keep in mind as we cover all of this. The Overton window on tariffs in general has shifted pretty dramatically. How many times, Casey, have we seen this on any number of issues in President Trump's time in office, both the first time and the second time? As it currently stands, yes, the China tariffs have been pulled off for at least 90 days at a pretty significant rate. However, there are still 30% tariffs in place on pretty much every good that we import from China. Also, the effective tariff rate as it currently stands right now it's at just about 17% or so. That's the highest in nearly 100 years. Now, that's lower than the 25-ish% it was prior to the 90-day pause. Coming into this administration, Casey, it was at 2.4%. So tariffs right now are in a very different place than they ever were before, and people are accepting them, and the market is reacting very positively to them just because they're not as bad as they could have been. But things have clearly shifted. Whether that actually leads to any long-term deals, fulsome deals, well, we got about 3 months to figure that out.
This does seem like a rather abrupt about-face. Did the president get anything out of this? Did America get anything out of this?
Oh, a lot. And so
I mean, about the whole, like, we did this, then we take it back. I get the benefit of him taking it back.
So I think Phil set this up very well and explained without the president taking a maximalist approach, it wouldn't have brought the Chinese to the table. You had the highest interaction between our two countries of this administration just occurred in Switzerland. Secretary Bessent and the trade representative negotiated. That also signals a lot to the world about how these trade deals will go about and how they'll be negotiated. And at the end of the day, we have a much higher tariff rate between us and China and mutually. It's probably the better way to say it. So that is also a clear sign for the world that you can actually have a normalized trading relationship. And then finally, what I think the big takeaway, and the markets are saying this right now, is this economy would be on an absolute tear with a little bit of certainty. What's happening with tax policy, regulatory policy, safety in the world, this is a new ball game, and with a little bit of safety and understanding about what's going to happen tomorrow on tariffs, everybody can start buying again, people can start living, things start happening again. This economy would be on a tear absent this tariff back and forth.
But what you're saying speaks to the inherent tensions and contradictions in the messaging. There are some people in the Trump administration that are saying, we're actually going to use these tariffs and keep them in order to bring manufacturing back, bring factories back. And then there are some people that are saying, we're actually just using this for leverage in order to get better trade deals, which is sort of what you're saying. But it actually is not clear which direction they actually are trying to go to.
It does also strike me that you're basically saying that, acknowledging that the Trump administration is creating incredible uncertainty.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. The ultimate game in Washington is to light the fire and show up with a fire hose and put it out. It happens in the Senate on a weekly basis. It happens in the House among the most outspoken people in the media. This is the Washington tradition. Light the fire and then arrive to put it out.
But do we really buy the idea that that's what Trump is doing?
No. No. Why? No.
Ashley, go ahead.
No,
Why not?
Okay. I'm on the phone when this is going down and people are like, oh, there's a deal with China. And everyone's like, what's happening? And these are not political folks, right? These are people in the entertainment industry, in the middle of America. And they're like, oh, Trump blinked. Like, he did all of this and then he had to stop because everything was going to be too expensive. And to the point of your intro, there weren't going to be things on the shelves. And so you're right. People did start spending again, and they're like, let me get all my products now in the next 90 days because we don't know. Because guess what? This isn't the first 90-day pause, or this isn't the first pause he did. He did a 30-day pause. This just doesn't seem to have the strategy behind it that I understand you giving him the benefit of the doubt, but that is actually being played out in real life.
I think the word of the day is uncertainty. Look, the news out of the market is wonderful today. I don't know where we are at the moment. We're not running a ticker, but the Dow was up 1,000 points a little bit earlier in the day. Yeah. It's responding to
Actually, here, let me jump in because we do have our sort of reportable lines on this. So the Dow, NASDAQ, and the S&P 500 posted the biggest single-day gains since April 9th, which is the day that Trump paused reciprocal tariffs.
Hello.
As of today, the Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 have erased the losses since Liberation Day. My 401k, it's been liberated.
Don't check,
Liberation Day.
Do not check your 401k.
Well, no, it's going to be better. Today's a great day to do it.
It will be better today. But this is the problem. If the president were to be consistent with the things he had, with any of these actions, perhaps we could have some measure of consistency. The problem is that the markets, and God, what I wouldn't give to have a former chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Oh my goodness, Patrick McHenry sitting across from me as I speak, as I live and breathe. But no, the markets have been responding not necessarily to each day's news, but the fact that we don't know what's coming tomorrow
Right.
or the next day because
Yeah.
the president and the White House cannot have a consistent narrative on any of this. And tomorrow, I wouldn't be shocked if he says something totally different that caused the markets to tank again, because that's what we've got.
And the reporting was that it wasn't because he thought it was going to lower prices. It was because he didn't want the bad reporting. Like, we have to know the president that we're dealing with. He is a good spinner. He can spin things. He is trying to tell a story. The story he's trying to say is now there was a deal. The reality is that the plan that they were rolling out, or the lack of plan that they were using, caused a lot of uncertainty in this economy, and so he just walked it back.